So our next presentation is called Thinking Comprehensively, a whole watershed approach to restoration planning. The French Creek watershed contains the miracle mile, 1 square mile with the highest number of different conifer species in the world. Might be the most productive coho spawning and rearing stream in California and supports agriculture and other human uses. Restoration planning to enhance and protect all of these needs requires a holistic and comprehensive approach. The Scott River Watershed Council has assembled a broad team of landowners, experts, tribes, and agencies to undertake a full watershed approach to restoration planning. Learn about our approach in this session and how our past successes are going to inform an expanded effort. To underscore the potential positive impact of restoration efforts on coho salmon populations, French Creek may offer valuable insights. Since 2017, various restoration measures have been initiated to support coho salmon. The increased utilization of this research by returning coho salmon can serve as a metric for assessing project effectiveness and identifying actions that may contribute to coho recovery. Betsy Stapleton is the Scott River Watershed Council project manager for the French Creek project, as well as Scott River Watershed Council's project development and permitting specialist. She has spent the last 11 years growing her expertise in all aspects of restoration planning, permitting, and implementation as Scott River Watershed Council has continually increased the scale and scope of its efforts. She brings skills in project management, data integration, and community engagement for her former career as a nurse practitioner and health plan manager. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Ms. Betsy Stapleton.
Good morning. There's French Creek, and it is my home, and I am deeply invested in the restoration that happens there. And I think we've heard that over and over about Morgan, who grew up here, Eric, who spent his life here, the UVA ranch, and I think that's a theme through all of our work, that this is our home and place, and that's why we're working here. Like Eric, and now acknowledging there's a team behind him. Eric did many of the graphs that you'll see here today, and Sharna's steadfast leadership as we face thinking about things and complexity and integrating various points of view. None of this would be possible without their significant contributions, as well as the whole Watershed Council team. Below on the bottom, you'll see some of the funders and technical advisors. There's been long-term investment and effort in French Creek. And I'm very glad to see other people fumbling with the clicker. So we'll see if I learn from them. This is a very popular picture. I love that picture. It's from French Creek, and it was taken by a professional photographer that the group tribe sent our way to observe what's happening under the surface, and that having adult and juveniles together is pretty remarkable. So we use it a lot in case you haven't noticed. But it leads to the question of why invest effort in French Creek. You know, there's limited amounts of dollars for this kind of stuff. Where do you target what you're doing? There we go. So in 2018, the Scott River Watershed Council took a formal approach to trying to determine where should restoration dollars be invested if our target was coho salmon. And we put together a whole variety of parameters. The major ones were how tightly constrained was the stream, was there water there in the summer, what's the history of coho spawning and rearing. And we identified reaches with high coho red density over a series of years, not just a one-off. And then we actually selected sites based on these multiple parameters. We were focused on the west side tributaries, not on the main stem, and that's part of the effort that we'll hear about a little later today. But French Creek there, 1, 2, 3, up from the bottom left. You can see it's just loaded with blue dots. That's tier 1 restoration. So This wasn't just random selection or the Stapletons live there, let's do projects on their property. It was actually based on the assessment of where could we provide value for restoration dollars. Again, why invest there? So there happens to be a lot of fish there, as you saw from Eric's presentation, and there are also beaver. And one of our thoughts, and it's gathering momentum across the state, is that beaver and coho suitability are deeply intertwined. And where beavers are successful, coho will be successful, and beavers can contribute to coho's success as well. So finding both of them in the same stream adds value. You can see that the beaver had a little difficulty there. There wasn't a lot of water for them. So fish need water, and so do beavers. And go ahead and play that for me if you would. I don't know if you caught this during the intermission. I went, oh darn, my thunder is stolen. This is one of my all-time favorite game cams. I have them out all over it because I'm incredible information. And those are two adults that swam up. That dam was about 5 feet high at the time. Perhaps, you know, you look at it and go, oh, it's a barrier, but the fish go right over these dams. And they're in that slow water up above the dams, resting and taking a little break before they go further. And their friend the beaver was just working away, trying to make sure that dam remained intact for them. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And also, why invest in Fresh Creek? Well, it is more than beaver and coho. We have bears. We have long-toed salamander. That find in French Creek was very unusual to find that amphibian that's usually at the higher elevations. We have bobcats, you name it, we got it there, including a wide collection of animals that like to eat coho. We have antlers, we have mink, we have otters, green herons, blue herons, and that's telling me that we have enough abundance of these fish to support the upper levels of the ecological pyramid. Okay, go ahead. You saw this slide, I think, earlier, and it is that example of year-over-year increases in spawning in a region. And we like to think that it's associated with restoration that was taking place. If you look at that map on the right, in 2017, we had just done one little restoration project, putting some BDAs, and 382 fish came through that counting weir, and we had 10 reds. But go on, in 2020, we had done quite a few restoration projects, including that spawn gravel augmentation that we're going to use vigorously, and we start seeing more reds, and then even more in 2023. I want to correlate the restoration projects that were identified, because this starts being part of the story. Is at that time, the Stapleton property, French Creek Ranch, was on the right of that map, vaguely outlined in white. And you can see that the property just kind of touches corners of French Creek, and that was our limiting factor, was landowner access. We could do restoration. And so it was very site-specific, small scale, though we think we were having a significant impact even so. Oh, thanks, I got it quickly. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Eric. So we think, even though they were small site specific restoration, that we were having impact. And that map that we showed was one indication. Another indication is that we were getting beautiful, big juvenile coho out of our restoration sites. I don't have the non-restoration site small little fish, but definitely, as you saw from Eric's graph, the restoration sites had bigger, healthier living fish. And in addition, on the left was a scoop with a seine from an area that we had done restoration, pretty full bucket, and on the right, scoop from an area in skinny little water like we saw in that beaver picture, and we sure didn't get very many coho there. So there's the biological response to restoration, and there's also the physical response. And of course, the two are connected. As you change the physical conditions, you offer animals, fish, more opportunities to thrive. But here's a really concrete example. Those of you who went on tour yesterday got to see this site. The picture on the left was during a very high water event. Previously, the water's in that channel. It's rushing like crazy. If you're a little tiny juvenile fish, that would be very adverse circumstance. You might be washed all the way out, way downstream, out to the ocean or whatever. After restoration on the right, that's a similar high water event, but we have put in structure and slowed down the water. And you can see just the remarkable difference between those two circumstances. What did we do? We put in a big concrete log structure that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there. And the water just comes up, hits that, and slows down. And then all kinds of soil and sediment things happen as well. Instead of pushing valuable nutrients out to the ocean, just like the fish, we're letting them deposit in that little flat floodplain area is starting to actually build soil. And then Eric talked quite a bit about adding spawning gravel. So I'm just showing you a picture of that as well. Here are some of the other restoration projects we completed on this small scale level. Some beaver dam analogs, human-made structures made to replicate beaver dam functions. There's one on the left during a high flow event, and you can see how we got slower water behind it. We constructed with excavators, the big yellow Tonka toys, a side channel that allows fish to get in there out of that fast water. And then we started working with natural processes. This was a naturally formed log jam. However, with the high velocities and forces, those naturally formed log jams don't have a lot of durability. So we came in and the crew worked in really cold water, adverse conditions, put the hydraulic post pounder in that boat, floated it out there, and drove some posts in to give that naturally occurring structure some more durability. Go ahead. We think a lot about beaver food. We talked about that on French Creek. Beaver food, we believe, is a significant limiting factor. People say, oh, you have beaver, that's great. They're going to do all kinds of good stuff. But if they're really struggling to find food, it's limiting their population and their ability to reproduce and spread. So we do a lot of planting associated with our projects. And on the left, you can see on the bank there what the soil looked like before we did planting just cobble and sand. And that extends for a long ways around the stream. This actually got very dense like that because we lowered the surface down, allowed water with the natural seed bank to get up on that surface and start doing all that natural production of healthy vegetation that the beavers can utilize. And absolutely, there's little beaver trails through there. They're in there finding the food. And then we tried a similar experiment as with that log jam of coming in and trying to help out the beavers by putting a post in that dam. Eric had a picture of that dam, and again, it was about 5 feet high. They build every year in the same location. It's in a deep trough of a channel, and every year it blows out. So those beavers have to go out, harvest materials, spend the energetic demands of building a new dam. That's a limiting factor for them. So we thought, oh, great, we're going to help them out. And we counted those posts, and it didn't work. The channel is too deep, too in size. The force, the unit power just blew out through there. But we're thinking about it, and we're trying things, and we're learning and watching. Go ahead. So I mentioned that we were limited to site-specific locations. Again, you can see the Stapleton property there outlined on the left. It's relatively small. And in late 2023, the Nature Conservancy came in and bought the property across the creek the Miners Creek Ranch. And, you can see the Stapleton property on the left there, an agricultural, property, small. And on the right is the, newly acquired Miners Creek Ranch. And, the TNC's purpose and acquisition, which Molly spoke to yesterday, is to look at ecological uplift in stream functions, return of the water right associated with that property after careful analysis of issues like, is it contributing to groundwater recharge and other issues like that, understanding what the real, water balance and dynamics, gaining and losing reaches that, Laura talked about, taking that all into consideration and the legal parameters around water dedications, which says you can only dedicate the amount of water that plants consume. Otherwise, the water that goes into the ground and so on is already ecological water. So all this will be put together, and then consideration of what to do with that ag field if we pull water off it. We, TNC and me as a neighbor is extremely uninterested in having it turned into a weed mess. Someone last night talked about knapweed. We do not want a giant field of knapweed, of water hemlock, and those other noxious weeds. And so the transition from irrigated pasture to a more native planting will take place very thoughtfully and after consideration and planning. Go ahead. I need to mention that Quartz Valley Indian Reservation is an important part of the core project team along with TNC. All right, now I'm ready to go. So when you start like something like this, you know, having lived and worked there for a while, 10 years of these small scale restoration projects, lots and lots of monitoring, we're starting not from ground zero. We're starting with some ideas about what's going on in here. And our working hypothesis is increasing habitat quantity, quality, and diversity will result in an increase in the French Creek coho population and benefit multiple other species at the same time. Even though we're focusing on coho, as Eric mentioned, it's sort of a keystone, or not keystone, but bellwether species that increase the overall health of the stream environment. And so what's broke? What do we need to fix? Well, that channel confinement, the deepening of the channel, the incision, channel simplification, disconnection from the floodplain, loss of riparian vegetation, decreased base flow, and excess sediment delivery. And this is sort of a picture of current conditions in the summer. And very shallow, ripply stream in a very straight, narrow, simplified channel. Go ahead. So we use lots of tools and we have a conceptual model about what we're doing. On the left is LiDAR, and you can see this is that Miners Creek, French Creek Ranch reach. Up at the flow is going from the bottom to the top. There's a bridge at the just up at the top. We have to think about bridges. And in the middle, there's kind of a lot going on, and that's where all that coho spawning was starting to happen. At the top and at the bottom, it's very confined and narrow. And if you think about it based on current restoration science, sort of healthy, functioning stream, there's lots of little channels, the water's up near the surface, and then as degradation happens, you get this more and more narrow confined channel. So we would say that the channel at the top and the bottom is in that very degraded state, and in the middle, it's pretty darn good. So how can we move those areas at the top and bottom more into that sort of middle functioning area? And here's a graphic representation of the narrow confined channel, and you can see that's on the top left there. You can see that there's riprap there that's holding that river into place, nailing it down, and then that's that more open confined water area with water going all over the place, lots of habitat. And again, that's we're breaking it up into reaches to think about the reaches differently. Go ahead. There's that riprap. And I'm going to point out it's already failing. So in its own lifetime, it's not gonna do the function it was intended to do. And we're really thinking about using this property differently. So one of the questions is, can we pull that riprap out? But we don't want to destroy all those riparian trees that's providing vital shade to keep the water cool. So we have to think about that. And then another physical process is French Creek is part of a granitic watershed, and there's huge amount of this decomposed granite or DG coming down the stream. Is that entirely natural? Is it from accelerated sources, from roads and logging? You know, what's going on here? We have to figure that out. You know, last piece is water management. This is a working landscape. Water has been used for human purposes, but can we do it differently so that we provide vital services when we need it? There's that coho trying to get upstream, and that doesn't look like ideal, transport conditions or spawning conditions. There is my personal agricultural field, lovely, green, producing hay, producing a product, producing beef that we then consume. Society needs agricultural production, but can there be different water management? In the graph on top, there's a gauge on French Creek, run USGS, CDEC, and on the blue or green line, 2023, we're getting pretty darn skimpy, down to about 1 CFS, heading into the fall season. And that's really not enough to support both summer rearing and then returning spawners. The line on 2024, there was a curtailment imposed. There was voluntary action as well, where TNC had made the decision to keep their water right 1.66 in stream as needed for coho. And there is a significant difference in the amount of water available. All right. Thinking about a lot of stuff like invasive species, weeds, that marlin mustard that we're all familiar with, walk around the valley, it's so pretty, it's yellow. That puts down roots that soaks up soil moisture. It has a toxin that inhibits the growth of native plants. So it's a major environmental detriment. That blackberry, try to think about being an animal and making your way to that incredibly dense blackberry. Bullfrogs. When you get low warm water, the bullfrogs move in. They eat a bunch of species. And so thinking about these things, do we have the answer? No, we don't have the answer. If we get more water moving through, will that wash out enough of the bullfrog egg sacs that the population won't explode? Will drowning out the blackberry do it? Do we need to come in and mow it? Someone suggested last night goats. So, you know, thinking about this stuff and putting the whole picture together. Go ahead. And again, I'm going to mention infrastructure. There's the bridge downstream. We sure wouldn't want to turn a whole bunch of logs loose, have them pile up on that bridge, take the bridge out. No one would like us, as well as costing the county a lot of money. So we have to think about things. And again, this is an agricultural landscape. There's irrigation infrastructure. Ensuring that we don't harm our neighbors by changing their water rights is part of the planning. We're not just going to run over the top of people. All right. So we went from site specific to reach scale at about a mile between the Miners Creek Ranch and French Creek Ranch. But we want to look bigger than that. It's a whole watershed. Stuff that's happening upslope, stuff that's happening on all those additional anadromous miles that you see outlined in blue. You know, it's all working together. So we placed a funding request, and we're honored to receive a commitment to funding to QBIR, which would then support our collaborative work together from the Bureau of Reclamation. Unfortunately, that money's been held in the current budget holdup, so we'll have to see how that plays out. That money was for both design and implementation. So rather than the usual typical practice of you plan something and then you spend a couple of years trying to find money to implement it, we would have been able to just make progress. TNC is in the process of buying an additional property. They have it under contract. It's not fulfilled. Looking at what restoration could be done on that property. Some of the timber companies have stream size miles that they're open to exploring restoration. And for the other small landowners, our plan would be to have kind of a conceptual drawing about, you know, we think this is how the stream is working. Would you be interested in doing anything? We do not have command and control. People are entitled to their private property rights. I feel that way strongly about my property. So, but bringing forward options, and have you thought about this? So that would be the plan for the additional private property, is to bring forward ideas for people to consider about what value could it offer you, what are the liabilities, is there a common ground here to get something done? All right. Oh, this references Eric's work here, or the whole team's work. We didn't know that up on that property that TNT is considering buying, how much the extent of Toho utilization was with this transition happening. The current owner allowed surveys, and we found both juvenile rearing and adult spawning. So again, these fish are using a huge amount of our habitat. And if we can think about that and support them across the watershed, we'll be providing them a lot of opportunities, a lot of choices, and also taking some of the lift off of individual small scale sites. We can start looking at the whole watershed. Go ahead. And then again, we have to really scale out even more what's happening on the upslopes. Looking at the geology, as I mentioned, this is a granitic watershed that has huge implications. Looking at the FEMA maps, where is flooding happening? Do we want flooding there? Is there something that we can do to mitigate flooding? If it's someone's house is there, thinking about all those kinds of things. Go ahead. Looking at forest and fuels, look on the right, those overly dense stands. We're understanding more and more what a negative impact they have. With drought, there's increased tree mortality. The risk of catastrophic fire is huge with all the soil scorching and all that. Those trees are also all stems sucking up moisture that perhaps in the past contributed to stream flow. So let's look at that set of issues. Logging. Did that logging accelerate sediment rates, or is it just kind of background rates? Let's really put some science behind that and think about it deeply rather than just having uninformed opinions. Go ahead. So what will we do in this larger project, assuming that we do find funding? High resolution LiDAR, hydraulic and hydrologic modeling, sediment source identification, and transport modeling. This assessment, conceptual plans, prioritization, and selection of a second site. Part of that selection is always landowner willingness. And then 100% design for that selected site too. Go ahead. Here's just examples of things that can be done upslope. Reintroducing fire in a healthy, safe way. Storage of water up in the uplands. Go ahead. And then even going out from the French Creek to the whole Scott, all this information will be feeding into the modeling and processes that we will hear about this afternoon in the Scott River Recovery Action Plan. So go ahead. And lastly, why do we do all this? Well, there's me and what I want, but even more importantly, there's my kids and their kids. And having the opportunity to live in the natural world in the way that I have is like the only thing that matters to me going forward. So this is my motivation there. There's one more now. So there's 3 of them that wanting to allow them to see the bears, the bobcats, the beavers walk in peace. So that's my motivation for doing this work. Okay, there's apparently time for questions.
Betsy, you seem to indicate that we don't know where all that DG is coming from. And I wanted to remind you of Sari Summerstone excellent study, which found out where it was coming from. And a lot of it's coming from the DG roads on the industrial lands up above. So what do you think? You think we still need to study more about that?
Well, I agree that Sari's work was stellar, and she implemented a lot of, with a whole group of landowners and the Forest Service all working together. They went out and did a huge amount of mitigation work that then decreased the sediment, and her follow-up work proved that those pools, were no longer filling. Well, in the last 3 years, all that seems to have reversed. Most of the drinking pools are filled up. When we put in those obstructions, they fill up with that DG in one storm event. So is the work that Sari did 20 years ago pinpointing the source now? I think we need to go look again and understand what's happening in the current condition.
It's my big, but I like that stuff on the FRGP side channel where you're promoting forks for beaver consumption. How much more potential is there to do that in other places, or has that been looked at? Because I guess for me, when I first started, I thought they just ate, willow and cottonwood. It's such a big part of their diet, like you're saying, for the nutrition and all that. It's usually forks too, but I never thought of that part until recently.
Yeah, I think that's part of that, MCR, FCR planning reach is, really our goal is going to be in this landscape where we have 2 willing landowners, is to increase that floodplain connection as much as we can and as much as the amount of water coming into it will support. We don't want to over excavate or connect and then there's not enough water and we sink the stream out. So really thinking about that, but yeah, getting as much floodplain in contact for all the species is our goal. Was I getting we're done?